Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
To listen to a trust fund baby lecturing Canadians about being too rich.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
He shouldn't quit his day job, but actually, he should quit his day job.
So you want to vote for a pretty boy Canadian named Justin. What could possibly go wrong?
I made a mistake. When I was a teacher out in Vancouver, I attended an end-of-year gala where the theme was Arabian Nights. And I dressed up in an Aladdin costume and put makeup on. I shouldn't have done that.
I admit I came in physical contact with a number of members as I extended my arm in, including someone behind me who I did not see. If anyone feels that they were impacted by my actions, I completely apologize. It's not my intention to hurt anyone.
Listen to Bill's Bandy Doughboy or Team Sexy. Listen, I'll tell you what. I'll have a little drink.
Hey, everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
Hey, bud. Hey, who?
You.
Hey, me?
Yeah, come here.
And that low-income families don't benefit from tax breaks because they don't pay taxes.
The new premier there, Danielle Smith, she's going to end up essentially going to war with Trudeau. It's enough to break up the whole damn country as far as I'm concerned, and there's an irritable part of me that thinks that would be for the best.
In consultation with the clerk just now, I'd just like to advise members that any discussions between the chair and the clerk are confidential, you know, there was advice given, and we're continuing pursuing the 106.4 that was brought forward today. So that is what we discussed right now. So, Mr. Chambers, you can continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So
Point of order, Chair.
I'd like to move, Mr. Chair, before we do point of order, could I get a ruling on the attire that's required at a committee meeting, please?
Mr. Chambers, in committees, there is no attire requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So back to the point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Turnbull.
Yep. So, Chair, have you made a ruling as to how to proceed based on the way you've opened up today's committee meeting? That my understanding is that based on the last meeting having been suspended, that the clerk's advice was to start this meeting on what was suspended previously, which was the motion that I introduced that was then amended and sub-amended by the Conservatives. What I'd like to know is what your ruling was on that, given the advice that you received from the clerk.
Point of order. Just on that point of order, I think we've got a very important study. Mr. Chambers is introducing a critical motion to study a problem that is costing the Canadians hundreds of billions of dollars, inflating the house price, and also aiding in the trafficking of fentanyl. I think this is a very serious matter. I'm very troubled that the Liberals don't seem to want to have that discussion.
Can I speak to that point of order, Chair?
And a point of order, Chair. The interpretation, I'm having no interpretation when Mr. Turnbull is speaking.
Mr. Turnbull, there is no interpretation. I think there were some issues with your audio before as well. I'm not sure if that's been addressed. No. It's still not been addressed. Can we wait for his? Mr. Turnbull, your audio is still giving issues to the interpreters. That's why there's no interpretation from your end. I'll look to Mr. Samari. Is that going to continue to be an issue for you? I'm seeing a yes.
Broadcasting across Canada, it's not being done in both official
languages. To hear the interpretation, much like the issues that Mr. Samari has brought up as well.
I'm sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Ms. Kaibaga.
Thank you. I'm not a permanent sitting member of this committee. I'm just visiting today, but I'm a member of other permanent committees. And when there's an audio issue, we usually suspend to try and resolve that issue. For the sake of all colleagues who are here who've taken their time on a Friday in a sitting week to be on this committee meeting, can we just take a time to suspend to figure out our MP Turnbull's sound and audio issue, because he is using the appropriate devices that are required to use, and I think that we should give him a fair chance to participate. Thank you.
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Lawrence.
Just on that, the Liberals had the opportunity, just as we did, to be here in person. Conservatives have chosen to have a member here in person. They have chosen not to. If they're unable to fill the basic tenets of the requirement to log on appropriately, there are other members that are able to speak, presumably. And if Mr. Turnbull, just like this is to act like in Parliament in general, if you're not in your seat, if it's not the rest of the committee's responsibility to take care of that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. That's not factual, as we are a hybrid committee. So hybrid means that you are able to provide both services.
Yeah,
so.
I would just ask all members to wait to be recognized before anyone speaks. I will say that in the beginning of each meeting, we do have audio checks, and it is a responsibility for each member to make sure that their audio is working correctly. I know also on this call, there's other members who also have audio issues, and you know, they've chosen not to participate right now until they get them resolved as well. So unless anyone else wants to speak to this point of order specifically, we'll move on. Mr. Davies, you want to speak on this point of order? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Davies. We can't hear you, Mr. Davies. Can't hear you.
Can I intervene? No, we cannot hear you. You can hear us clearly, but the info from
Colleagues, so you know, Mr. Davies, I think you can work with IT in the background from the advice I got. And I've also been advised, Mr. Turnbull, we can't recognize you because it can't be interpreted in the meantime, but you're more than welcome to have your other Liberal colleagues to present on your behalf. So moving on, we'll go on to Ms. Thompson. You have your hand up. Is it on this point of order, or is it?
Hello. No, actually, the point of order, I would like some clarity. Please, Mr. Chair, if the clerk's email indicated that today's meeting on Friday, May 17th, would resume the meeting 142, which is currently suspended. Could the chair confirm which meeting we're on? I think we've lost focus here. And then I would like to speak to the need to suspend and ensure that we have communication and ability for all members using House of Commons headsets, that they're able to have the opportunity to participate. But if we could begin, please, with clarity on what meeting we are beginning with today.
I can hear you. Yes, Mr. Davies. Ms. Thompson, look, we're on meeting 142, and as I indicated as the chair before, that is what we're on right now, currently. And so I think that's pretty straightforward. And and I'll move on to Mr. Davies for his, he has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I presume everybody can hear me now? Good, thank you. I was about to say that I agreed with Ms. Kayabaga's remarks earlier. It's a question of privilege. Each one of us is a member of this committee. We have a right to participate, and we have a right to participate either in person or remotely. There's no distinction. Rights are not accorded to whether you're present in the meeting or not. Every person around this table has participated both remotely and in person, particularly in a break week. Mr. Turnbull is the parliamentary secretary to the minister. He is a lead. He has a right to participate in this, and it appears through no fault of his own the technology is not working. The proper answer isn't to plow forward in a meeting and remove his voice at the committee. It's unfortunate when we have technical problems, but this is not an analogous situation to either being in the House or not in the House. This is a situation where we all have a right to participate, and I would agree this meeting has to be suspended until Mr. Turnbull's right to participate is resolved. If he were not using the proper headset or were otherwise somehow not doing proper, just like I did just now, I had a proper sound check and then couldn't speak. The meeting should not proceed if I'm silenced because of the technical issues. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. And you can't just say, well, someone else can speak for you. We each have a right to participate equally in this committee. So I'm going to also move that this meeting be suspended until
Point of order.
Mr. Turnbull's audio issues are resolved.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Before we get to that, colleagues, I just want to, after talking to the clerk, he's made it quite clear that it's not that any privilege is being taken away. This is much like the House of Commons, where the Speaker made a ruling in there as well, that if interpreters cannot interpret, then members cannot be recognized. It's a very clear ruling by the Speaker in the House of Commons. It's not that any privilege is being taken away by any member, and just like in the House of Commons, any member has the ability to have other colleagues to speak on their behalf, much like after any speeches are given, if you're recognized and you're able to be interpreted, then you're able to speak. So that's the rule that, that I've seen followed as well. And if interpreters cannot be interpreted, the members cannot be recognized. It's happened to other members in this committee before as well. We've never had this same issue.
Well, that being the case, Mr. Chair.
There were other people ahead of you.
Okay,
I would
wait
ask members to be recognized. Mr. Chambers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we back? Here's what I would propose on the same point of order that we've been discussing with respect to Mr. Turnbull. We could suspend for 2 minutes, allow Mr. Turnbull to try to get this worked out. If that does not work, we should continue with the meeting, which would be the same as how we would do in any other circumstance. And would give the governing party opportunity to find a sub if that's what they require, or to rearrange their affairs accordingly. But we should get back to the meeting for which we have this 1064 and the movement, which I believe I still have the floor, and I have moved that motion. So would like to...
So the other day, my kids asked if I would take them sledding. We weren't on that hill for more than a few minutes, me carrying up those sleds and toboggans, and I got winded so quickly. We got to the top, and I thought I was about to cough out a lung. It's not that tall of a hill, it being in Saskatchewan. So instantly, my mind went to the thought of, what could possibly be the cause of this? My first thought was, did I catch a bug that's going around? I thought maybe I have the wrong footwear on. Maybe if I had to put boots on, it would have been easier to climb the hill. I even had that weird passing thought of, is there some kind of gravity well buried underneath this hill? And then the thought occurred to me, it's 40 years of not taking care of myself. I even laughed for a split second at how instantly my first thought was to try to find something else to blame. And you probably see this all the time with yourself, your loved ones. How many times has someone in your family knocked a glass off the counter and then said, "Who put this so close to the edge?" And it got me thinking, the vast majority of people, while we might have those thoughts for an instant or a second, we also have a healthy dose of responsibility. And we look at how our own actions led to the negative outcome, the glass shattering or being out of breath at the top of the hill. But some people don't. Some people never take responsibility for their own actions, and they always try to find someone else to blame for all the negative consequences. And Justin Trudeau is one of those people. Let me explain.
A major development now from the Global News Decision Desk. Canada's new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, with his wife, Sophie.
This is Canada, and in Canada, better is always possible. Thank you.
For Canadians, yeah, grocery bills suck. Rent sucks. Mortgage renegotiation, oh my God, how are we going to deal with it? Like, these are real fears.
After 8 years of this guy, a lot of things suck in Canada. But here's what Justin Trudeau's doing. He's trying to convince you that the reason why housing sucks, inflation sucks, interest rates suck, are all because of factors beyond his control. He's some passive observer of all these global phenomena that's driving up your prices and making your communities less safe. If I can just pause here for one quick second, please like and subscribe to my channel. That way you won't miss out on any videos in the future. Let's take a look at just 3 examples that Trudeau himself admits suck. Inflation. The reason why your paycheck doesn't buy as much stuff is because Justin Trudeau devalued our dollar.
You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
More dollars chasing fewer goods always equals inflation. But instantly, Trudeau, the Liberal propaganda machine, including the CBC, went into overdrive to try to convince you it wasn't Trudeau's fault.
The reasons for higher prices are getting more complicated.
The labor market and inflation are acting in a way that we've never really seen before.
But indeed, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of factors that deliver higher food prices, not just for Canadians, for people around the world. And one of the key ones is Russia's continued illegal invasion of Ukraine, Mr. Speaker.
It was global supply chain issues, or a war in a country that Canada does less than 1% of our trade with. Baloney. It was because of Trudeau's own policies, his own monetary policy, turning to the Bank of Canada to bankroll his out-of-control and wasteful spending. Just think about the $35 billion to the Canada Infrastructure Bank, $60 million on the Arrive scam app, or the hundreds of millions of dollars paid to high-priced consultants for work that the public service is already doing. There's a direct link between Trudeau's policies and the inflation and interest rates that's causing so much hardship. But what is Justin Trudeau doing? He's still looking for a scapegoat. It's also pretty amazing at how much help he gets from his friends in the media. The latest attempt to try to shift attention from Justin Trudeau's role in all of this is the conversation around shrinkflation.
Pepper Brooks was upset when she discovered the new bottle of Dawn she bought contained 10% less dish soap than an older bottle in her cupboard.
It's true. When you go to the grocery store, you get less for your money. What's actually happening with shrinkflation is that the dollar you earned doesn't buy as much. That's it. That's all you need to know. Justin Trudeau has devalued your currency, the money you get paid, the money that you've saved up. He's made it worth less so that when you go to the store, you can buy less with it. They're even talking about bringing in new regulations to try to prevent companies from doing this.
Shrinkflation is not helpful for consumers. It's not fair. It needs to be regulated, and it needs to be regulated now.
What they're not talking about is how it was Trudeau's policies that made your paycheck worth less. The carbon tax is also a major driver in inflation. Experts across the country agree that Trudeau's carbon tax is a major factor in driving up prices. And not only is Justin Trudeau refusing to acknowledge that and get rid of it, he's actually going ahead with his plan to hike it.
There will absolutely not be any other carve-outs or suspensions of the price on pollution.
Government policy with direct connection to terrible outcome. It's like Justin Trudeau got to the top of the hill, completely out of breath, and now desperately trying to blame something else. Housing. Another thing that even Justin Trudeau admits sucks in Canada. How did we get here? Did all of a sudden magical forces in Canada's economy just converge on the housing sector and cause all kinds of problems? No. Justin Trudeau's inflationary policies also bid up the price of homes. Easy cash flooding through the system meant housing prices go up. And then there's the fact that Trudeau's housing minister, Sean Fraser, admits that the previous immigration minister helped cause the housing crisis by not managing the immigration file properly.
Or in particular, the international student program. And this is where we have a serious issue that we need to address and are working to address now. The international student program in particular has grown just in the last couple of years by hundreds of thousands of people each year.
Hey, Kelly, do a quick Google search there. Who was the previous Liberal immigration minister?
It was Sean Fraser.
It was Sean Fraser. That's right. Sean Fraser is actually blaming a previous iteration of himself, but not taking any responsibility for it. This is bizarro liberal deflection and lack of accountability. This is another direct line between Justin Trudeau's policies and deliberate decisions and terrible outcomes for Canadians.
What police call a targeted attack on a transit bus in the Metro Vancouver area.
He ended up stabbing me right in my rib. I didn't know it was a stab at first. It just felt really warm and my breath cut really short.
It would actually be borderline criminal to just say that crime sucks in Canada right now. It's awful. Tragic stories of people being murdered on public transportation, or families having multiple cars stolen out of their driveway on the same day. This is life after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. Take a look at all the major crime stats. Car thefts through the roof. Extortion at levels we've never seen before in Canada. Drug addiction, overdose deaths, all directly linked to Justin Trudeau's deliberate policy decisions. And Justin Trudeau and the liberal-friendly media in Canada would have you believe that crime is just kind of like the weather, like, oh, there's an unseasonable warm front moving in and we don't know how long it'll last. It's directly linked to his policies. When he took office 8 years ago, he started repealing common sense conservative laws that contained tough jail time for repeat and dangerous offenders. And he made it easier to get bail. He actually passed a law that instructs judges to grant bail in as many cases as they possibly can. And that's why repeat and dangerous offenders are back on the streets committing more and more crimes. It's a cause and an effect. Softer penalties on criminals, you get more crime. But let's come back to that original thought. Of course, there is an understandable and natural inclination to try to find someone else to blame when something goes sideways. But responsible, rational people will take responsibility for their own actions. Now, it's not surprising that Justin Trudeau doesn't want to do that, because if he takes responsibility, you might not vote for him again. And he's desperate to cling on to power so he can continue implementing his extreme and radical position. So there's really only two possibilities to explain why Trudeau's doubling down on all these policies that cause so much hardship. The first is that he's so clueless and incompetent that he doesn't realize that it's the decisions he's made that's caused all these problems. Now, that's pretty scary. To think that Canada, a developed G7 country, is led by someone who is so incompetent that he can't even follow the simple logic between the cause and the effects is actually horrifying. He thinks that nothing's his fault and everything's an external or magical force that he can't be responsible for. Or the other possibility is that this was all intentional, that he knew what the outcomes of his policies would be, and he actually wants Canada to be more divided, to be less safe, to have more and more people struggling. Because when more and more Canadians face more and more hardship, it's easier to sell them bigger government. It's easier to convince them that they need more and more government control of their lives, intervention in the economy, and bigger programs. These are the outcomes of the policies that he believes in. His radical extreme ideology is why he printed massive amounts of money, is why he rewards local gatekeepers, is why he lets dangerous criminals back out onto the streets. When you look at radical Marxist leaders like Justin Trudeau in other countries, in other periods of time, they actually do this on purpose to create dependency on government, to justify more and more spending, bigger and bigger government, and more control over your lives. Now, regardless of which explanation it is, whether it's monumental incompetence or a horrifying agenda to justify his government overreach and to keep him in power, the solution is the same. Under Pierre Poilievre, Conservatives will axe the tax, eliminate the carbon tax so prices can come down and you have more in your pocket at the end of the week. We're gonna fix the budget to bring inflation and interest rates back down. We're gonna build the homes, incentivize municipalities to build so home prices can come down and young people can start their lives. And we're going to stop the crime by taking the criminals who commit the crimes off the streets. That's the way to make Canada stop. I was gonna say stop sucking. Yeah.
Bart, why do you pick up words like that?
Yeah, Mo, that team sure did suck last night. They just plain sucked. I've seen teams suck before, but they were the suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked.
Homer, watch your mouth.
And as always, thanks for watching.
I brought home a nice chunk of lots of pasta from work today. Worked at 11 to 6. It was a good day, so can't complain about it. I hope everyone had a good day as well.
Bonjour, Canada. On behalf of Sophie and myself, as we gather around pools and lakes and oceans for Canada Day with friends, family, and neighbors to share in snacks, sweets, and our favorite foods. We would like to wish you a safe and enjoyable Canada Day, and thank you for being Canadian and doing what Canadians do best: live in Canada. Happy Canada Day 2021.
The NDP leader was just asking about why the Prime Minister gave tens of millions of dollars in corporate handouts to powerful grocery chains.
Stop giving millions of dollars to corporate grocery stores. When will the Liberals, when will the Prime Minister stop giving big grocery a free ride?
The answer, of course, is that he voted to let the Prime Minister do that. Not a single penny of that money could have gone without the vote of the NDP coalition partner. But we learned something else, that this might have been due to the influence of the NDP leader's spokesman and brother, whose company is a lobbyist for Metro.
Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's...
Should the punishment for MPs using inappropriate language in Parliament go beyond expulsion? What would be appropriate?
I don't know if they should go beyond expulsion, but they should have a penalty for using foul language in Parliament. I don't know what to say the punishment should be, but I think they should be accountable for their actions because they are a public figure.
Looking at somebody's tenure there, if they've become somebody that's had a history of acting like this, or using these sorts of phrases, then yeah, I would say looking at their position as a whole and the suitability of their role, maybe they're not somebody that you would want as an MP.
Maybe they shouldn't be an MP anymore.
I think our MPs should act with honesty and integrity, and bad-mouthing somebody and calling them a name doesn't accomplish a thing except to make me wonder why somebody has voted that kind of person in.
No, I don't mind them using some harsh language. You know, if it's done relatively tastefully, but sometimes a bit of harsh language does, you know, shift people's minds pretty quickly. But I mean, I would prefer to see the Parliament be professional. But I know they have to use lots of the politicians are lawyers, and they have to. They're a brash, aggressive group of people, and.
No, I don't believe so. Definitely things get heated and things are said in the heat of the moment. They're saying if it's inappropriate words that aren't racist or hate language, I believe that it's appropriate to have an expulsion for that day.
I think the expulsion was, I think it's justified if terms like that are being used. But I think that it should be fair towards everyone in the House, because I believe Trudeau called PIERRE spineless as well during that same debate. I think it just should be the same across the board instead of just directed at one person.
Well, I think it just depends on what's said and how it's said, really. The context of the leader of the opposition, PIERRE POILIEVRE, what he said about Trudeau and his operation there, being, quote, wacko. I mean, the speaker told him 3 times to correct what he said, and he just interchanged the words with other words. Extreme, he said, and other things like that. So after giving him multiple opportunities, I think there should have been a penalty, and I think what the speaker came down with was right, was appropriate, because you got to maintain decorum in the House.
Expulsion being just, I'm assuming, just for the day.
Yeah.
No.
You think that's appropriate?
Yes.
Okay.
I agree. I agree.
It should just stay there.
Yeah, one day. They learned their lesson, I would hope. You know, they're supposed to be adults.
I think expulsion is enough, actually, and, you know, at least for a day, I'd say for sure. And I don't really buy that the Conservatives were saying that the Speaker unfairly sort of targeted Poilievre or censored him. I think calling somebody a wacko is completely unparliamentary. So that's what I think. I don't think whatever it was the Prime Minister said was not. Yes, spineless, but it's not. I don't know. I don't think it's on the same level, and I'm not really a fan of either of them. Less of PIERRE POILIEVRE, but yeah, no, I think it was fair.
So I think personally, when you're in a professional role like that, we need to hold people to a pretty high standard. And I think using an appropriate language when you're in a position of power like that, it should definitely get the proper punishment, and it might have to go beyond such.
Like what?
Maybe we could talk about legal actions and maybe fines for using inappropriate language.
What would be appropriate? Well, expulsion plus fines, some kind of reprimand, because they have to have respect for the country's main facility. That's what it's there for. They want us to have respect for government. They should at least have respect for the building they're in.
In order to create an environment where people think that the politicians are having good conversations that are based on like they're making evidence-based decisions and it's not personal. To me, when you start using that kind of language, it sounds more personal, and I think that we need to get back to the politics of governance as opposed to the politics of showmanship.
I don't think beyond expulsion, but that, again, it depends on the severity of what they are saying. If it's very outlandish, very out there, if they are personally denigrating someone, then yes, I think it should be.
So what would be appropriate?
I mean, some sort of fines.
I tend to use pretty colorful language. I know, like, Parliament isn't the place to be using it, but I feel like expulsion should be good enough. It might, depending on what they're using, if it's a racial slur, maybe, yeah, definitely things should go further than just expulsion. But if they're just dropping an F-bomb or an S-bomb or something like that, like, I could see past that.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
I think, we have to be careful of our language in the committee.
like we do in the House, and you can continue, Mr. Mazer.
Just a point of clarification.
Sorry, one
So,
more.
no, whoa. We
Sorry,
gotta
point of
go.
order, there's a point of order, yeah. Go ahead.
It was actually a point of clarification, so if you have another point of clarification, go first.
Sorry?
So,
who's speaking? Is it?
My point, I asked you also if you could, since the member opposite mentioned that the same rules apply here as they do in the House, does contempt of the House in making misleading statements also apply here?
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. How y'all doing? I've been trying to tell you these committee meetings, there's something else. Here's another one. It is off the charts. Dan Mazier, another soldier from Poilievre's army, is fighting against, or trying to raise attention around one of the biggest Trudeau cover-ups. And this chair of the committee is the most incompetent. Let's take a peek. Oh my goodness. These committee meetings, guys, they're worth watching. Let's take a peek at this one. It's nuts.
the matter before us today is extremely serious. There is a glaring problem here that should alarm every Canadian. In fact, after hearing the Environment Commissioner's testimony and reading his report, I think this may be the most expensive cover-up since Justin Trudeau was elected. In December 2020, the Liberals announced the Net Zero Accelerator. They charged taxpayers $3 billion to fund it. Less than 1 year later, they doubled the spending and announced another $5 billion for this government program, increasing the total cost to $8 billion. Yes, $8 billion. It is very important to note that the Liberals claim the purpose of this Net Zero Accelerator was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Their plan was to give away billions in tax dollars to large companies in exchange for a specific reduction of emissions. Usually when a government announces $8 billion in spending, they brag about it for years and talk about the results. But ever since the Net Zero Accelerator was established, we've barely heard a word from the Liberals on this $8 billion program. And now we know why they've been so quiet. Last week, Canada's Independent Environment Commissioner revealed that the government's Net Zero Accelerator is nothing more than another slush fund. He concluded that the Liberal government, and I quote, did not effectively manage the Net Zero Accelerator to decarbonize the manufacturing industries in accordance with Canada's climate goals or with due regard to value for money for Canadians, end quote. Not only did we learn that the government was giving...
Sorry, I don't know if it's point of order or not, but I believe the member opposite was just referring to something that the Commissioner said when he was here, and he did not call it a slush fund, so I'm just wondering whether there's something that can be corrected in terms of the record, or...
Could you speak to that? I mean, look, I think you were interpreting what the situation is all about. Did you say you didn't say it was a slush fund?
What was I'm sorry. Could you read it again?
Oh, I didn't say that. Okay, I'll say it again here. Let me go back to that. So I'll read it again. Last week, Canada's Independent Environment Commissioner revealed that the government's Net Zero Accelerator is nothing more than another slush fund.
I don't believe that's what he revealed at all. I've read his report, and he did not say that or reveal that in any way. So you must have listened to a different commissioner than I did, because that's not what I heard him say, and that's not what I read in his report. So perhaps you could reference that.
Can I continue? It's a bit of a point of debate, but I think I think Mr. Mazier is interpreting he's interpreting the larger context. The commissioner clearly did not say that, and for the record, okay, go ahead, Mr.
Okay, he concluded that the Liberal government, and I quote, did not effectively manage the Net Zero Accelerator to decarbonize the manufacturing industries in accordance with Canada's climate goals or with due regard to value for money for Canadians, end quote. Not only did we learn that this government was giving away billions of dollars without measuring the value for money, we also learned the government has no clue if the money is reducing emissions. The Environment Commissioner literally stated the majority of funding was approved by the Liberals without without any commitment to reduce emissions.
All right, gang, we're going to get into it. Question period has kicked off. I'd like to say hello to everybody in the room, if I could possibly do that. Like Sheila, Kirk. There's so many people here, guys. Kenzie, what's up? Raz, how are you? Mr. Pickles, good day. Elizabeth Brewer, how are you doing? El Guapo, Patty Zadal, obviously, good to see you. There are so many people here today, guys. Too Slow, what's up? Boomer Media, how are you? Adam Louis, Dimebag Coins, like, it's such a great, amazing crowd to watch these politics with.
Joy and comfort, and fundamentally, music unites us. And so today, I make this overture to congratulate Symphony Nova Scotia on their 40th anniversary. Throughout the years, Symphony Nova Scotia has embraced the full spectrum of genres, from classical to baroque to pop to jazz to spectacular collaborations with some of Canada's biggest stars.
Individuals that follow Canadian politics. On behalf of the many residents of Willowdale, I'd like to offer my condolences to his wife, Heather, his family, and his many, many friends. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wonderful statement. Wonderful.
The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte de Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. When a country's statutory holidays are not celebrated for the same reasons everywhere, you have to ask yourself why. Yesterday in Quebec, we celebrated the memory of the patriotes who fought against the British Empire for our freedom at the very cost of their lives. Meanwhile, in Canada, some were celebrating the crown of the same British Empire that hanged them, and which, to this day, has never apologized for this act of colonial violence. Chevalier de Lorimier and his brothers-in-arms were on the right side of history, however, and what followed proved them right. In amongst other things, they demanded a government that was responsible and accountable to the people of Quebec. Quebec remembers its martyrs, and Canada continues to celebrate their executioners. When such a division exists within a country, it's because there are two countries. While this weekend saw the memory of the patriots scorned, let us remember that the best way to honour their sacrifice is to win. The patriots' fight is our fight. Our victory will be their victory. The Honourable Member for Orléans. Mr. Speaker, it is with a sense of pride and accomplishment that I share with this House that on the 2nd of May, the Minister for Official Languages travelled to Orléans to announce a federal government investment to the tune of $36 million for the construction of the new MIFO Centre. Since 1979, MIFO, a pillar of the Francophone community, has touched the lives of more than 100,000 Francophones. The revitalization of MIFO into a carbon-neutral building in the very heart of an official language minority community will help the Francophone and Francophile community of Orléans, Ottawa and Eastern Ontario to provide community services and spaces for all generations. Thank you to the local leaders and to my colleagues in the National Capital Region for all of your support. Mr. Speaker, we have our new centre for MIFO.
The Honourable Member from Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
May is Skin Awareness Month, and with summer underway, the Save Your Skin Foundation is using this time to increase awareness and promote treatment and prevention of skin cancer. My wife, Kelly, is a melanoma skin cancer survivor. Unfortunately, too many have lost their lives to this disease, while others continue to fight. It was projected that in 2023, 9,700 Canadians would be diagnosed with melanoma and 1,250 would die from it. Sadly, these numbers continue to rise year after year. Skin cancer is caused by overexposure to UV radiation from the sun and the use of artificial tanning equipment. In the past, I tabled a private member's bill that strengthened warning labels on artificial tanning equipment, which was enacted by our previous Conservative government. This summer, I encourage all Canadians to enjoy the great outdoors and be skin safe. The good news is that prevention is easy. Wear sunscreen, cover up when outside, seek shade, and avoid tanning beds, and of course, have lots of fun.
The honourable member from Mississauga Lakeshore.
I rise today to recognize the 100th anniversary of Port Credit Secondary School. As one of the oldest educational institutions in Ontario, the school has a rich history. It has survived the Great Depression, the Second World War, a devastating fire, and even a visit from our friend, Prime Minister Chrétien. The school's alumni have gone on to successful careers, raise families, and make significant contributions to our country. With academic excellence as its central mission, Port Credit Secondary continues to inspire the minds of the next generation. The school is a beacon of learning, helping to guide our young leaders in the pursuit of wisdom. Congratulations on this historic achievement. Here's to another 100 years, and as its motto goes, may the light never fail.
Bravo. The honourable member from Milton.
The Canadian sports broadcasting world has lost a giant. Born and raised in Porcupine Plain, Saskatchewan, Darren Dutchyshen was a mainstay on TSN Sports Centre for close to 30 years. He was in many ways the heartbeat of TSN. Dutchy loved sports. Dutchy loved Canada, and Dutchy loved his job at TSN. And no one was more passionate about bringing the sports highlights to Canadians every single night, and he always did it with a giant smile, his massive personality, and often inappropriate humor. Rod Smith and Jennifer Hedger and countless other Canadian broadcasting legends have shared moments that exemplified Dutchy's unforgettable personality and remarkable talent. It's been a tough time, but those memories have been very touching. Confident and kind, larger than life, and always smiling, Darren Dutchyshen was a beauty. To his kids, Tyler, Brett, and Paige, and his partner, Kate, to his TSN family and all of his fans, I want to extend deepest condolences and express our sincerest gratitude for all the amazing stories told by Dutch, all the laughs and highlights. Dutchy, you left an indelible mark on the Canadian sports narrative, and we'll never forget you.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
After 9 years, this Liberal government is not worth the cost or the corruption. While Canadians struggle with a cost of living crisis, the Liberals dish out billions to government contractors for their Arrive scam. Last week revealed more corruption. Another lavish dinner between GC Strategies, the two-person IT company, paid $20 million for doing no work, and government officials. The head of this two-person operation had their house raided by the RCMP in their investigation into the Arrive scam. On top of this Liberal mismanagement and waste, we learned that the former CBSA chief, John Osowski, was given a one-day contract for $500 so that he could access documents to prepare him for a committee appearance. All the while, he was working for a consulting firm that does business with the Government of Canada, another glaring conflict of interest and waste of taxpayer money. This incompetent Liberal government is a burden Canadians cannot afford. Conservatives will use every measure possible to bring home accountability for Canadian tax dollars and put a stop to corruption.
Then I have Deputy, the honourable member from London West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to celebrate the rich heritage, diversity, and resilience of the African continent ahead of the Africa Day on May 25th. As a member of this private community, I understand the importance of fostering strong ties between Canada and Africa. Africa Day serves as a reminder for our shared history and the ongoing journey towards unity, progress, and prosperity for all African nations, and as well as the African diaspora, including the 1.3 million African Canadians. It is a day to honor the struggles and the sacrifices of those who fought for liberation, justice, and equality, both in Africa and in communities across our country. Canada's relationship with Africa is essential for promoting peace, sustainable development, and mutual prosperity. Through collaborations, areas such as trade, diplomacy, and life-saving healthcare investments, including Gavi and IDA, Canada and African nations can work together to address common challenges and seize the opportunities for growth and innovation. Together, we can build bridges of understanding and cooperation that benefit both our nations and contribute to a brighter future for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, our nation is gripped in an opioid crisis, with over 42,000 Canadians dying from overdose since 2016. Yet this Prime Minister still allowed hard drugs like cocaine, meth, and heroin to be used in public spaces in my province of British Columbia. Our once safe hospitals are being destroyed by these radical drug policies. The BC Nurses Union is ringing the alarm bell, saying that vulnerable patients and staff are being exposed to illegal drugs, harmful weapons, and increased violence. Common sense conservatives will not allow this catastrophic experiment to come to the rest of Canada. Our Safe Hospitals Act will put the brakes on the insanity, punishing criminals who bring dangerous weapons, violence, and illicit drugs into our hospitals. We will immediately pass my common sense bill C-321, which will protect first responders and healthcare workers from increased violence they face while serving our communities. A common sense conservative government will ban hard drugs and taxpayer-funded opioid handouts. Instead, invest in compassionate treatment and recovery for our loved ones.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Many Quebec families have had to cancel their summer vacation because Liberal taxes with block assistance have made it unaffordable. Some people find it hard to buy food, so they can't even start thinking about going on vacation. The Prime Minister is going on vacation, a luxury vacation, but at the same time, Quebecers are having to cancel theirs. We are asking the Prime Minister to offer respite to Quebecers by removing all new taxes, including the carbon tax, so that people can just go on holiday. This would allow families to save hundreds of dollars for those and Quebecers who want to visit the Maritimes or Ontario. The Conservatives will cut taxes for everyone in the next elections. Will the Prime Minister adopt this measure to offer a summer boost for Quebec families? The Honourable Member for Argenteuil-la-Petite-Nation.
The Honourable Member from Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Mr. Speaker, last week I joined the Health Committee during its 2 days in Vancouver as a part of its study into toxic drug crisis. We met with people on the front lines, supervised consumption sites, overdose prevention, low barrier housing, healthcare and recovery providers, law enforcement, and the community court. We also met directly with people who use drugs, the very same who are bearing the terrible and lethal impact of toxic street drugs. I learned a lot over those 2 days, especially about harm reduction and safe supply as necessary parts of a continuum of care with treatment and recovery. Unfortunately and shamefully, not one single Conservative MP showed up in Vancouver. Shame. Rather than learn and bear witness to evidence-informed policies on the toxic drug crisis, the Conservatives would rather embrace bumper sticker politics, false narratives, and scapegoat the most vulnerable. The Liberal government has failed to meet this crisis with the urgency it demands, and the Conservatives are playing politics, all the while people die.
The Honourable Member for Bailey-Chambly. I often tell my colleagues from Jonquière and Lac-Saint-Jean we should talk to Claude. I'm talking about the biologist, Claude Villeneuve, who was a giant every single day and a giant in science. He passed away on Sunday evening. A scientist and a professor for whom ideology did not replace science. University was for research, the creation of knowledge that was then put towards the common good. Claude said that he was less skilled than he actually was. It was easy to get him to speak, but sometimes it took him a while to stop speaking. In 2003, he founded the Chair in Eco Consultancy. He started the Carbon Boreal system. The international scene is losing a researcher whose tools were even incorporated into the UN in 2017. Claude complimented us in his last week, saying, "I'm pleased to present my project because I know that with you, it will get done." What a compliment, Claude. But you left us far too soon.
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, fun fact, this Liberal NDP minority government is now the longest serving minority government in this country's history. Not so fun fact, Canadians have never been poorer. with the worst standard of living crisis in 40 years. And in the middle of this historic cost of living crisis, this government decided to hike the carbon tax 23%, ruining Canadians' vacations. Conservatives just announced their common sense plan to axe the carbon tax and all federal taxes on gas from Victoria Day to Labor Day weekend, saving the average Canadian 35 cents, or for those in Ontario, $592. Common sense Conservatives know that what Canadians really need a vacation from is this government and their tax hikes, which is why when Canadians elect a Conservative government, we will axe the tax in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, forever, for everyone.
The honourable member from Malpeque.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and recognize Nick Green, a constituent of Malpeque and an island beef producer that is in Ottawa today with maritime beef producers for their annual Hill Day. Last year, Nick and his operation Kingsview Farms earned the Maritime Beef Council's 2023 Environmental Stewardship Award for his commitment to sustainability in agriculture. Nick is a third generation on the family farm, which was first established in the early 1900s. When he fully took over the operation in 2019, he set out to improve efficiency while benefiting from the environment and reducing input costs. Through a series of operational changes that relied on conservation and regenerative farming practices, like a closely managed rotational grazing system and late spring calving, Nick has managed to achieve his goals. He's now on track to achieve a 75% reduction in fertilizer and chemical costs and 50% reduction in diesel fuel costs by 2025. Nick, congratulations, and thanks for being a leader in your industry.
Oral questions. Questions à l'honorable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Here we go.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister, they're not worth the cost. Taxes and inflationary deficits are piling up, and even worse, the Bloc and the Liberals want to radically hike taxes on gasoline and diesel. When 25 countries have cut gas taxes and Western provinces have cut tax and were able to bring down prices at the pumps and lower inflation in terms of other provinces, how come the PM cannot follow my common sense plan to eliminate taxes until Labor Day? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy that the Conservative leader raised the question of inflation, because it gives me the opportunity today to share great news with Canadians. It's that our inflation rate dropped to 2.7%. This is the lowest level in 3 years, and it's thanks to our responsible plan for the budget. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Learned the terrible news that inflation is 35% above target. Again, after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of debt interest. And they can't do basic math over there. The 0.7 is actually a third higher than the 2% target. They're patting themselves on the back when they realize that Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. So why don't they, instead of quadrupling the carbon tax on the backs of Canadians, why don't they follow our common sense plan to suspend all gas and diesel tax until Labor Day?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader has quite proudly and publicly called for the Governor of the Bank of Canada to be fired. But maybe it's the Conservative leader who should lose his job, because he just revealed his astonishing ignorance of the Bank of Canada's inflation target. The Bank of Canada has a target of between 1% and 3%, and for 4 months in a row, inflation in Canada has been within that target.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The minister doesn't even know that the target is 2%, and perhaps one of the reasons why she's missing the target because she doesn't know what it is. It's the same thing with interest rates that we're paying on national debt. They've said that doubling national debt is an issue because the interest rates were so low. That's why I suggested setting the rate with 10 or 30 years with bond rates when the rates were so low, like we do with mortgages. But the incompetent minister did not do this, and now we're going to pay more interest on the $400 billion that will be renewed this year. Why? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the Conservative leader is very incompetent. The only thing that he plans to do, rather, is to criticize Canada and Canadians, to criticize our wonderful country. The reality is that the inflation rate is down to 2.7%. This is very successful for our country, and all members should be happy with this. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Not only does the incompetent finance minister not know the inflation target, she doesn't know that you lock in low rates when you have the chance. Remember, the Prime Minister was saying, don't worry, we can double the national debt because interest rates are low. Yep. Glenn, problem is, I told him at the time that they should lock in those rates for 10 years or 30 years with long-term bonds. It turns out they didn't do that, and now $400 billion of that debt will roll over into these higher rates, forcing Canadians to spend more on interest than on health care. Why did he hire the worst mortgage broker in the world to be our finance minister?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
The Conservative leader is in a grouchy mood today. And I think we all know why. The only thing he knows how to do is talk down Canada. And what he just cannot bear is the reality that thanks to our fiscally responsible economic plan, inflation is at a 3-year low.
That's right.
Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada for 4 months in a row. That's good news for Canada and Canadians.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Think that you pay down debt by borrowing more, that you stop inflation by printing money, and that you fight the drug overdose crisis by legalizing hard drugs. So at least they're consistent in their irrationality, Mr. Speaker. But now they've been forced to backtrack right before the election on their legalization of hard drugs because Canadians are revolting against the policy. Today we have a motion that will be voted in the House to permanently ban hard drugs. Will this government vote for that motion, or will they admit that they plan to legalize drugs again after the next election?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is wearing more makeup than I am today. Now, I think it's wonderful.
I'm going to ask.
Whoa.
Colleagues.
Come on.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to withdraw that comment. We don't comment on the appearances of members. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I withdraw that comment.
Can continue with her. She has 25 seconds left on the clock for her answer.
The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is phony all the way through. He is phony when it comes to his concern about the economy. All he can do is talk our country down. And he is phony when he talks about his concern about the opioids crisis. He tries to score cheap partisan points. It's just not right, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
The Honourable Members for Saint Jean. It looks like the Liberals have just discovered they're sensitive to the Francophonie cause. The Association Parliamentaire de la Francophonie had 18 Liberals in 2021, 11 in 2022, and 22 in 2023. And then since last week, a sudden realization there are no fewer than 112 members of the Liberal caucus that are now members of the APF. Congratulations, Francophiles, thank you. What an extraordinary commitment to the French language. But can we find out what the Liberals' priority issue is at the APF that explains this sudden commitment on their part? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I would truly like to thank the member across the way for her question, because our government and myself personally understand that the French has taken a step back in Montreal, in Quebec, and across the country. But I have to tell the member that I don't find this situation funny. It's not a joke. The Quebec nation is so important for us, as is the French language. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. If they didn't decide to stack the APF, it's not because they've had a sudden epiphany and they realize that French is under threat in Quebec and Canada and around the world. No, they signed up because nothing is more important to a Liberal than another Liberal. They have to stick together. They're there because they need to stave their friend from Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, and then we'll never see them again. It might be a good idea for this government to work in the interests of the French language as hard as it works in the interests of the Liberals. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the French language in Montreal, in Quebec, and across Canada is very important for our government. We understand that there has been a decline in French, and we are going to always support the French language and Quebec culture and French culture across Canada.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
The Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants against 5 senior Hamas and Israeli leaders. This is a step towards justice for Palestinians and Israeli victims of war crimes. And the Liberals promised to support the ICC when they voted for our motion in March. So will the Prime Minister and the Liberal government state clearly that Canada supports the ICC's work to hold all those responsible for crimes accountable?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canada respects the independence of the International Criminal Court. Canada condemns the terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th. Canada calls for an immediate ceasefire and deplores the humanitarian tragedy. And Canada believes it is absolutely wrong to equate the terrorist leaders of Hamas with Israel.
The
Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
And that was not the subject of the arrest warrant.
The Chief Prosecutor of the ICC has requested arrest warrants for 5 senior Israeli and Hamas officials. This is an important step towards justice for Palestinian and Israeli victims. Can the Prime Minister clearly state that Canada will support the work of the ICC to hold all those responsible for crimes accountable? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, Canada respects the independence of the International Criminal Court. Canada condemns the October 7 attack, which was a terrorist attack. Canada is calling for an immediate ceasefire, and Canada says that it is not right to equate the Hamas terrorist leader and Israel.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, it is clear the Prime Minister is not worth the cost of fuel. Most Canadian families will struggle just to be able to afford their yearly summer road trip. That's because his carbon tax has helped push the cost of fuel up to record highs. Now, Conservatives have called for a common sense plan to axe the carbon tax and all federal taxes from fuel from now until Labor Day. That would save about 35 cents a litre. Will the government adopt our common sense plan so Canadians can afford their summer road trip?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so glad that the Conservatives are raising questions about the cost of living and the lives of Canadians, because it gives me an opportunity to point out that inflation in April was 2.7%. That is the 4th month in a row that inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. And for 15 months now, Mr. Speaker, wage increases have been outpacing inflation. That helps Canadians.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
That's the Liberal message, that Canadians have never had it so good. The carbon tax is failing, except at driving up the cost of everything. Actually, the government is succeeding very, very well at driving up the cost of groceries, home heating, and of course, fuel. The carbon tax is sending millions of Canadians to the food bank for the first time, and it's pushing the cost of simple things like driving to your favorite family vacation spot out of the reach of hardworking Canadians. While the Prime Minister gets to stick Canadian taxpayers with the bill for his exotic vacations, Canadians are struggling just to scrape enough to take their family on a trip. Why won't they adopt our plan and take the tax off of fuel for the summer?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage my honourable friend to actually read the work that was done by 300 economists across this country, which says unequivocally that 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back in the rebate than they actually pay in the price on pollution. That is addressing affordability, and in fact, Premier Smith herself said she got more money back for her family than she pays. If he really is concerned about affordability, though, I would encourage him to go to talk to his friend Premier Smith, who just increased the gas price by 13 cents, and did so with no rebate and no accounting for affordability.
The honourable member from Lakeland.
After 9 years, Canadians can't afford the costly coalition's carbon tax, but this Prime Minister doesn't care. He'll quadruple it, even though 70% of Canadians and 7 out of 10 premiers told him to spike the hike. Now, Conservatives' common sense plan is to axe all federal taxes on gas until Labor Day to save Canadians 35 cents a litre. That's more than $955 of needed savings for Alberta families alone. Will the Prime Minister axe the tax on gas this summer so Canadians can afford the basics and maybe even a Canadian road trip staycation?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' lack of common sense approach to these things is about axing the facts. Every reasonable observer, 300 economists across this country, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, are very clear. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back, and it's those that live on modest incomes that actually do the best, all the while fighting climate change. If they have questions, I encourage them to go and talk to the Premier of their province of Alberta about the fact that she gets more money back than she actually pays. That is a responsible plan to address affordability and to fight climate change.
The honourable member from Lakeland.
Well, after 9 years, it's clear that everyone but these out-of-touch elite NDP Liberals knows the carbon tax isn't worth the cost. Page 4 of last year's Budget Officer report says, quote, maybe you should listen, taking into consideration fiscal and economic impacts, most households will see a net loss. The NDP Liberals' inflationary tax and spend agenda makes everything more expensive and hurts vulnerable Canadians. The most common sense Conservatives will axe the tax for all for good, but since fuel prices have surged over 50% under him, will the PM at least axe the tax off Canadian summer road trips?
The Honourable Minister for Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, it is very clear. 300 economists across this country agree. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back in the rebate. It is an approach that addresses affordability, does so in a manner that actually addresses climate change. Mr. Speaker, I would encourage
encourage my honourable colleague across the way to talk to her premier, who has said it is a price on pollution that actually gives her family more money back, and she should go and have a conversation with Premier Smith, who just raised the price on gasoline by 13 cents with no rebate and no plan to address the climate crisis.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, our jet-setting Prime Minister has begun his summery luxury tour early, blowing through Philadelphia with his usual all-expenses-paid five-star hotels and all the food and alcohol his entourage can take. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, most Canadians can hardly afford a summer road trip. Will he adopt our common-sense plan to put $682 in the pockets of British Columbians and give them a shot at a summer road trip, or is he planning on putting himself first?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Once again, I would encourage my honourable colleagues across the way to stop misleading people with respect to the price on pollution. They need to look and read the letter that was written by 300 economists across this country that say the carbon price is the most economically efficient way to address climate in a manner that actually addresses affordability for Canadians. I would encourage them to go to talk to their friend Premier Smith, who said exactly that. Her family got more money back than they actually paid in the price on pollution. And I would encourage them, if they're concerned about the price of gas, go talk to Premier Smith and ask her to reduce it by 13 cents that she just raised it with no rebate whatsoever.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
That rhetoric won't put money in the back pocket of British Columbians. And while the cost of this jet-setting Prime Minister summer luxury tours and vacation soars, his carbon taxes and gas taxes are driving Canadians nose first into the ground. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Canadians are struggling to afford a simple road trip. Our Conservative common sense plan to give $682 back to the people of British Columbia. Will the Prime Minister agree that his carbon tax is a road trip wrecker and axe the tax on gas this summer?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really astonished by the gall of these Conservatives who have the temerity to talk about the road trips of regular Canadians when they racked up $426,283 of the money of Canadians traveling to their own convention. The member for Central Okanagan was one of the Conservatives who charged regular Canadians to go to his convention. That is not right, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Lac Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Immigration has finally met with his counterparts from Quebec, the provinces and the territories, and they have finally addressed the issue of reception capacity. The solution, a working committee. A working committee to examine the distribution of asylum seekers. It doesn't seem to me that this wasn't a problem for the Minister. It seems to me that when we asked for a more equitable distribution, he told us that asylum seekers are not cattle. Are we to understand that nothing will change between now and the committee's recommendation on the ground? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If he'd like to criticize the working committee, perhaps he should also criticize the government of Quebec because they proposed it, and with the other provinces we said yes. He wasn't at the meeting 8 days ago. We did agree in a communiqué that we work together unanimously and coordinate our efforts, because we know that asylum seekers do need to be welcomed in Quebec, and we can do this in coordination with all provinces. The honourable member for Lac Saint-Jean. I would ask if he invites me next time, I'll be there. Quebec is asking to be reimbursed for $1 billion for the cost of welcoming asylum seekers. Quebec is just asking the cost be shared with other provinces so that they're doing their fair share. Quebec is calling for a reduction in temporary immigration and power to approve all applicants, and calling for French language requirements. And what did the immigration minister offer Quebecers after months of shirking his responsibilities? A committee. Is there even a deadline for this committee to start delivering results? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. What we don't invite to these meetings are quarrels, Mr. Speaker. We want to work together, and our communiqué was unanimous for once with Quebec. And in terms of French training, we've set aside around $5 billion since 2015. We want to make sure once again that French is strengthened in Quebec. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. At the end of the meeting, the Minister of Immigration said that the status quo was no longer acceptable. But as we speak, it is still the status quo. Nothing has changed on the ground. And as we speak, the federal government hasn't paid Quebec back 1 cent. And Quebec still receives more than half of all asylum seekers in Canada. This committee mustn't be allowed to become a toy to buy time until the election. It needed results yesterday, and it's even more urgent today. So when are results due? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker, the status quo is the bloc which has done nothing for 30 years, even though we have given billions to Quebec for French training. Those are the results they've achieved.
The Honourable Member from Hastings, Lennox-Naddington.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 summers, Canadians know this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. His carbon tax has hiked up the price of everything. Canadians deserve relief, not taxes. Unlike this coalition of convenience, Conservatives have a solution. Cancel all federal tax on gas from now until Labor Day, keeping nearly $600 in the bank accounts of Ontarians to spend on basic needs and maybe even visit with family. Mr. Speaker, would it be too much to ask for the Prime Minister to lend a helping hand to Canadians and take the tax off their summer road trips?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I'm curious if the honourable members actually approach Conservative premiers across Canada who maintain their own taxes on fuel. Mr. Speaker, in particular, in the province of Alberta, Danielle Smith has increased the price of fuel by 13 cents and offers no rebate. I expect she knows very well that the majority of families receive more than they actually pay in a fuel tax, but facts don't seem to matter to a party who is committed to eroding all of the environmental protections that exist in this country and have virtually no plans to invest in the things that are going to help working-class families address the cost of living. We're in search of solutions, not fights. I wish they'd at least come armed with facts.
The Honourable Member from South Shore St. Margaret's.
Conservatives are calling on the NDP Liberals to axe the carbon tax and all federal taxes on gas from Victoria Day to Labor Day. For Nova Scotians, this represents $542 of savings per family this summer. After 9 years, we know the Prime Minister will jet off to surf in Tofino this summer at taxpayers' expenses while Nova Scotians can't afford a summer road trip.
That's right.
Will the Prime Minister do a surfing cutback to help Canadians by taking the tax off the summer road trip?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, I know the Conservatives are excited. They think they found a new bumper sticker to put. But what would they say to that family? Not only are they taking away their carbon rebate, they also would be taking away child care. They'd be taking away their dental care. They'd be taking away their diabetes medication. So what they'd say in exchange for taking all of those things away from vulnerable people is to say that a false, empty promise. And that's what we have on the other side. Empty rhetoric and really attacking vulnerable people at a time when they most need help. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to stand with those who need help.
The Honourable Member from Brandon-Souris.
Speaker, after 9 years, Canadians can't afford this NDP Liberal government's carbon tax that they just increased by 23%. That's why Conservatives announced a common sense plan to axe the carbon tax and all federal taxes on gas from Victoria Day to Labor Day.
Great idea.
It's a 35-cent per litre saving, Mr. Speaker. In Manitoba, this would represent over $600 in savings for each family during this summer. So will the Prime Minister lend a helping hand to Canadians and take the tax off their summer road trip?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was actually just in Manitoba last week where we were announcing supports for Canadian families, Mr. Speaker. More investments in creating more childcare spaces to relieve the burden for families. These are programs that we continue to invest in. The Canada Child Benefit, the dental plan, excuse me, Mr. Speaker. Investments in Canadians, well, we see the Conservatives continue to vote against, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from King Vaughan.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, people can't afford to live or die. Funeral costs are now out of reach for Canadians in Ontario. The increase in unclaimed bodies is 488% since 2013. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Seniors are already struggling with affordability crisis. They have built this country and now they can't afford to bid their loved ones farewell. When will this Prime Minister show some compassion and stop the out-of-control spending so people can live and die with dignity?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, for somebody to live with dignity, they need access to dental care. For somebody to live with dignity, they need access to their diabetes medication. For somebody to live with dignity, they need access to the medicine and support and health care that we're making sure we deliver each and every day. And for the party opposite, the Conservatives, to say the solution to global inflation and the crisis that people are seeing all over the world is to slash supports to vulnerable peoples, to attack the very supports that lift them up in the darkest times that we've faced in generations, we say no. We will continue to be there for Canadians and make sure they get what they need.
The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 years, the cost of the grocery basket has gone up by 21%. Food banks are incredibly full, but the Liberals and Conservatives are doing nothing. The CEO of Metro is a Conservative donor. We know who the leader of the opposition is really working for, and the Liberals are giving millions of dollars to Loblaw and Costco. People are hungry, and meanwhile, the CEOs are getting the VIP treatment. Enough is enough. Will the Liberals support our motion to ensure that CEOs pay their fair share? Yes or no? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we have an economic plan for fairness for each generation and for each Canadian. Mr. Speaker, we know that in order to fund that plan in a fiscally accountable manner, we need to ask the wealthiest to pay a little more. And that's what our government is doing. So my question is for the Conservatives who oppose our plan. They are the ones who are against a fair plan.
The honourable member from Vancouver, Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are hungry and hurting. Liberals have failed to lower food prices while Conservatives promote corporate greed. Yeah. Over the last 3 years, grocery prices increased 21% while portions shrink. In 2023 alone, grocery giants made a record $6 billion in profit, all while Canadian families are tightening their belts and missing meals. That's why today New Democrats are forcing Liberals to take a stand. Will they support our motion to make CEOs pay what they owe, or continue to put profits over people like the Conservatives do?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government has put forward a plan for fairness for every generation, a plan to invest in housing, in affordability, in economic growth. And we've done it in a fiscally responsible way because we know inflation has to come down so interest rates can come down. To do that, Mr. Speaker, we are asking those who are the most successful in our amazing country to contribute a little bit more. That's tax fairness, Mr. Speaker. We support it. The party that opposes it is the Conservatives.
That's right. Good job.
L'honorable député de Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle.
Mr. Speaker, 8 out of 10 Canadians support a woman's right to choose. Yet, it seems the Conservative leader is unwilling to assure Canadians that he and his party will defend this fundamental right. Could the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth remind the House of our government's position on a woman's right to choose? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for her advocacy and her tireless work. I am proud to stand in this House to tell Canadians our government will always defend and support a woman's right to choose. Conservatives claim this is settled, yet anti-choice bills and petitions keep cropping up. Mr. Speaker, it is settled for us. No ifs, no buts, or maybes. We will never stop defending the rights women in this country have fought so hard for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Well, Mr. Speaker, July 1st is going to be a disaster for people looking for housing in Quebec. We know that new housing construction has gone down in Montreal for both collective and individual housing year over year. We see that this Prime Minister's strategy is just another in a long list of failures. Will the Prime Minister do something about the obstacles that are preventing new home construction in Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting because the colleague who asked the question does not have a plan to address the situation. We have a plan to make the necessary investments to construct housing. For example, Mr. Speaker, we've signed an agreement with Quebec to build 8,000 new units of affordable housing.
Leader of the opposition, when he was housing minister, was only able to build 6 units across the entire country. They're going to cut the programs for housing. We're going to make the investments. There is not a clearer contrast.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, what the minister should remember is that over the last 9 years, this government, with its friends in the Bloc Québécois, created the conditions that has made the cost of living so high today, along with interest rates and inflation. $500 billion in inflationary spending was voted for by this government and the Bloc Québécois. And that's why Canadians and Quebecers today don't have enough housing or just can't access it because it's too expensive. So can I get an intelligent answer to my question? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We see that sometimes memory can be quite short. My colleague seems to have forgotten that the Leader of the Opposition, when he was Minister of Housing, only built 6 units of affordable housing throughout the whole country during his entire term. 6. Whereas just in Charlebourg-Saint-Charles, my colleagues writing 222 units of affordable housing were built over the last few months, thanks to the financial support of the Quebec and federal governments. The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government, we see that this Liberal party is not worth the costs, and Canadians are paying the cost. We're seeing now that rent has doubled with these Liberals in power, and people in Quebec are very worried because they know that there's going to be a crisis on July 1st. In Le Soleil, Nicole Dion, the coordinator of a housing organization, is saying that starting in mid-May, people are starting to panic because they may not be able to find housing and will end up in the streets. What does this government have to say to people who won't be able to find decent housing? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madame Dion is quite right. And she would be very shocked to hear that the Leader of the Opposition only created 6 units of affordable housing when he was Minister of Housing throughout the country during his entire term. Not 6 just for Quebec. 6 units of affordable housing throughout the entire country. Now, in my esteemed colleague's writing, Louis Saint-Laurent, we have built hundreds of units of affordable housing just in the last few months, thanks to the leadership of Quebec municipalities, which my Conservative colleagues like to call incompetent. Mr. Speaker, it's really unfortunate to see that my colleague from Quebec is continuing to engage in this kind of partisan mudslinging. I don't think Madame Dion would actually be in favor of what he just said. We know that people are suffering in Quebec. We know that 815 people asked for help from the CMHC. Would this minister like to go see them and talk to them about this kind of ridiculous point? The Honourable Minister of Procurement. Well, Mr. Speaker, I would be very pleased to go visit the 160 affordable housing units that were built in my colleague's riding. But the problem is that his Conservative leader is accusing Quebec municipalities of being incompetent. And yet, currently, in Quebec City, hundreds of units of affordable housing are being built thanks to Quebec City's municipal leadership with the funding from the federal government. So instead of boasting about these 6 meager affordable housing units that the Conservative leader built, well, we are working constructively with everyone involved. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, the government has brought in a gag order to implement the budget, but this is a budget that's all about interfering in Quebec jurisdiction. It's all about making decisions on behalf of Quebecers, forcing strings onto Quebec and its cities to cut housing, or saying that housing will be cut if the conditions aren't met. It's intruding into the area of health. It's taking over all sorts of powers in the financial sector. It's almost as if the Liberals were a bit into separatism, because once again, we're seeing this budget attacking Canadian federalism. Why not cooperate with Quebec instead of picking fights here? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Well, I'm very surprised to hear my colleague worrying about federalism, and I'm glad he cares about Canada. We also care about Canada. We've brought in programs that matter for all Canadians. And in fact, the Bloc Québécois should be ashamed because they, during the campaign, said that they would be working for the environment, for seniors, families, and for housing, and they voted against all of that. They should be ashamed. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Well, I will say that I don't care very much about federalism, but I do know that Quebecers want to be masters in their own home. But instead, in this budget, this federal government is trying to be the master of everything. The Liberals are trying to step in instead and do things that the provinces ought to deal with. But meanwhile, no one is keeping an eye on the federal government's jurisdiction. For example, no one is helping people between 65 and 75 who are not getting an increase in OAS. No one is helping with EI. No one is dealing with asylum. No one is helping in key sectors like forestry or aerospace. So instead of trying to just do everything on behalf of the provinces, why don't the Liberals actually deal with their own business? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you who's taking care of our seniors, the Liberal government. I'll tell you who's helping with housing, the Liberal government. Who's taking care of our youth, the Liberal government. Who's taking care of climate change and the environment, this Liberal government, Mr. Speaker. Meanwhile, the Bloc Québécois does one thing and one thing only. Pick fights, Mr. Speaker. They've lost sight of their moral compass. They don't even know why they're here. And at the risk of repeating myself, I would say that originally these people were here because they cared and they had passion, but today they're only still here for their pension.
À l'ordre, j'invite tous les collègues.
I would invite all of our colleagues to be very prudent in how they use language.
South Surrey, White Rock.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister and his extremist agenda, once safe BC hospitals are now infested with chaos, drugs, and weapons. The BC Nurses Union confirms staff are exposed to fentanyl and meth smoke, even in maternity units. This is wacko. That's why I will introduce the Safe Hospitals Act that will toughen penalties for criminals who bring in weapons and ban the minister for allowing open hard drug use in hospitals. Will the Prime Minister support our common sense Conservative plan, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, in the first order, Mr. Speaker, if we're going to have safe hospitals, we have to provide science-based, evidence-based information and not support misinformation, because too often in our hospitals it is actually misinformation that is fueling much of the aggression that our doctors and nurses is facing. And secondly, I would say to the member opposite, the Health Committee going and listening to people on the ground in British Columbia and hearing directly from those affected by this toxic drug crisis. Why were the Conservatives not there? Why did they not send anybody to listen? Why are they not actually on the ground listening to those people who are suffering in this crisis? It's time to act on solutions and evidence, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from South Surrey, White Rock.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it'll be news to the BC Nurses Union that they're spreading disinformation. Here's the reality. Nurses should never be exposed to fentanyl smoke in their workplace. Patients should not have to worry about dangerous weapons when they're vulnerable, seeking treatment in hospitals. After 9 years, I can't believe I even have to ask this. Does the Prime Minister support tougher sentences for criminals who bring weapons into hospitals? And will he make it permanently illegal to smoke meth in hospital rooms next to newborn babies? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, of course, the only thing that separates the member opposite and her concern for victims and for families is that I and my colleagues here on this side of the House want to use evidence-based solutions to make sure that we respond to the crisis with things that are working. The reality is the strategy the member is advocating was first led by Newt Gingrich in the United States. It was the greatest disaster of his career. He has completely abdicated any responsibility for it, saying that it was a disastrous mistake. Stephen Harper's only actual advisors are saying the same thing. What they're advocating wouldn't work, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal coalition, Canadians are suffering with crime, chaos, drugs and disorder. The minister talks about evidence. What about the evidence from the BC Nurses Union and their outcry to ban weapons and hard drugs inside of hospitals? What more science could there be than that, Speaker? On this side of the House, Conservatives announced our plan for tough penalties for weapons in hospitals and to not allow the minister to decriminalize or even legalize hard drugs. Why do we have to ask again, will the Prime Minister make it illegal to smoke crack and meth in a hospital next to a baby?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, I find it disappointing that the member across actually did not join the recent visit by the Health Committee to BC to speak to experts on the ground. Actual member of the committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we follow science, we follow medical experts, we follow best evidence-based practices in order to save lives. The war on drugs didn't work then, it will not work now. We need compassion, evidence, and science to guide us through this.
L'honorable député de Sudbury.
The honourable member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives voted against our Medicare legislation, which describes our government's plan to provide Canadians with free medication. This bill represents an important step forward to ensure that Canadians all have access to free reproductive choices and that no one will have to ration insulin anymore. Can the Minister of Health tell us about the positive effects of this bill for Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for her important work on this issue. We share her objective of ensuring that everyone in the country will be able to access the medication they need. That is absolutely essential. I have a simple question. For almost all of the members of the Conservative Party who are against this legislation, why are these members against access to contraceptives? I can only think that these members are against women's rights generally.
Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes.
Last week we learned that 3 contractors involved in this Prime Minister's $60 million Arrive scam alone were awarded $1 billion. After 9 years, we know that this Prime Minister isn't worth that cost. But let's also talk about the corruption. One of those contractors who received $20 million in IT contracts but did no IT work had their doors kicked in by the RCMP. But what we also learned is that they were wining and dining senior officials from this very government. So we know that it cost $60 million. How many boozy dinners were involved in this $60 million scandal?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend knows very well that there are internal investigations taking place with respect to this matter. A number of people were properly called before parliamentary committees and came to testify. And of course, he also knows that the RCMP are looking into this matter. He made reference to that in an overly dramatic moment as well. So, Mr. Speaker, he should have the decency to let the police do their work. We've said from the beginning, anybody who misused taxpayers' money will be held to account, and I have confidence that the RCMP will do their work.
Absolutely.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the ad hoc committee concluded that the Prime Minister went to unprecedented lengths to hide the Winnipeg lab documents from Parliament to protect his government from political embarrassment. In other words, a cover-up. And the cover-up continues. Last week, Liberal and NDP MPs voted to shut down a parliamentary committee to get to the bottom of the cover-up. A cover-up of a cover-up by the cover-up coalition. A simple question, what are they hiding?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, the honourable member across would be aware that his party was against any of the mechanisms that actually brought these documents to light. It was this government, in fact, I was the House Leader at the time, that made sure that we had an ad hoc process to make sure that there was a way to properly vet secure documents. And that's why these documents in full, unredacted, are available for everybody to see. Now, the Conservatives refuse to participate in that, and they continue to search for some way to pretend those documents aren't available. But to any Canadian, not just any parliamentarian who wants to see those documents, they are available in their entirety.
L'honorable député de Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are defending something unacceptable. The member for Glengarry Prescott Russell used vulgar and aggressive language towards Quebec witnesses who were defending the French language before committee on May 6th. The member must be punished. He has tarnished the reputation of the committee and all its members. But of course, for the Liberals, a buddy is a buddy. They'd do anything to defend one of their own. Will the Prime Minister listen to reason and finally respect Francophones by removing the member from the Standing Committee on Official Languages and replacing him as head of the International Association Parlementaire de la Francophonie? The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, Mr. Speaker, the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell has spent a great deal of time in this Parliament defending French in Canada, much more than any member from the Conservative Party, in fact. We will continue to stand up for the French language throughout Canada, including in Quebec. And the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell will do everything that he can to stand with us to defend French throughout Canada.
Très content que le ministre s'est repris.
Yes, thank you for correcting yourself, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are worried that the right to choose, along with sexual and reproductive health care, are no longer guaranteed. Our government has made critical investments in protecting and strengthening sexual and reproductive rights in Canada. Could the Minister of Women, Gender Equality and Youth update the House on the work our government is doing to support sexual and reproductive health care across this country?
Very important.
The Honourable Minister for Gender Equality and Youth.
Speaker, I appreciate the member and the question. Strengthening sexual reproductive health care is essential to ensure that women can make their own decisions when it comes to their health. It's why we're making contraceptives free to 9 million women across Canada. It's why the Menstrual Equity Fund was created, which has lifted nearly 3 million people out of period poverty. It's why we invested $45 million into the Sexual and Reproductive Health Fund to organizations providing essential services. Investments like these, Mr. Speaker, are a true step forward to lasting gender equality.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Trinkets and beads, Mr. Speaker, that's what Obsidian Oil, an American company, has been willing to offer the Woodland Cree First Nation. Their drillings have caused earthquakes and polluted the land. Worse yet, now that Treaty 8 First Nations are exercising their treaty rights, the company has called on the RCMP to imprison Woodland Cree leaders. Wow. It's a shameful display of colonial tactics that have plagued Indigenous communities for generations. Will the Liberals uphold the treaty and support the Woodland Cree against this greedy company?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Mr. Speaker, self-determination over Indigenous land is so critical to our path towards reconciliation. We will be working with the Woodland Cree as well as my colleague opposite towards a resolution to this very important issue, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Churchill, Kawatunak, Aski.
Mr. Speaker, major wildfires hit early this year here in northern Manitoba because of drought, because of climate change. Thankfully, evacuees in Cranberry, Portage and elsewhere are back home. But in addition to thousands of hectares, the fire destroyed fiber optic and telecom lines and left major centres like Flin Flon stranded without vital internet and cell service for days. Bell MTS has reconnected their customers, but the truth is there need to be backups in place. Let's be clear. We need plans that apply to the catastrophic effects of climate change. Will this government step up, use its jurisdiction over telecom companies, and ensure critical infrastructure plans are in place for communities during climate emergencies like these?
So, Chief Dale, here we are with my Shadow Minister, Shannon Stubbs. We just visited the future site of the liquefaction, the wood fiber liquefaction plant that the Squamish people are developing in partnership with business. I understand it's a pulp and paper site that has now been beautifully refurbished and cleaned up. What does the project mean to the Squamish people?
Well, I think one of the things is that, especially with our Squamish Nation, we've always relied on the forest-based industry, from stump to stump, right from doing logging all the way down. But, a lot of the other businesses, like the pulp and paper mills, the Nexon site out in the ocean front, my dad always said to me, he says, we couldn't even get a job sweeping the floor there.
Right.
So... But, with the wood fiber project, they went over and beyond, and we worked out, getting back benefit agreement with them. And it seems that, we're always involved with employment, training, and education, bringing revenue for the nation, but also, first and foremost, dealing with the environment, right?
Right.
Like my mother always said, 92 years old, make sure they do it right, but
make sure they do it. And your mother's still alive.
92 years old, yeah.
So you don't want to get her angry.
No.
You've got to stay on her good side.
Yeah, she's top of the pecking order.
Absolutely.
She's mom.
And she's to protect the environment, keep the water and the air and the soil clean.
Yeah. And then, I've seen the changes there. I've seen it, it used to be all brown on the outside with the pulp and paper mill. And now you see there's prawn traps in there. You see the salmon coming back. You see, with all the other industries that came down, but, improving it. We have the heron come back. We got the dolphins coming back. We have the orca and the killer whales coming back. Just in here, the dolphins are chasing the heron, and the orcas are right in the middle there, waiting for the dolphins to come back out.
Wow. Yeah, we saw the sea lions over there as well.
Yeah.
So the project has really cleaned up the old abandoned pulp and paper site, reclaimed the land, and we see the nature is flourishing, and the Squamish people are going to flourish with jobs, paychecks, revenues for the community that will do great things.
Yeah, and one of the things, we're born and raised in this community, right? I'm born here, raised here, I'll die here. I'm not going anywhere, right? But, we have always say we don't do anything at the expense of our First Nation nor the expense of the community of Squamish. We want to do our part to go up and, with liquid natural gas, lower emissions.
Yeah.
I think we want to do our part in there as the Squamish Nation too as well. So
I understand this is going to be if not zero, it'll be close to zero emissions. Once you've got the clean hydroelectricity to power the plant, get the cool climate to reduce the cost of liquefaction, and then the best environmental practices in the world.
Yeah, so it's much more better, like I say, we don't do anything at the expense of the environment either, right?
There's a great Squamish people there who are reclaiming the land, protecting nature, and I should mention that Squamish people are building beautiful housing developments in Vancouver, that are going to house thousands of families on a very small landmass, which is an incredible achievement that we need to replicate many times over. So we need the entrepreneurial spirit of the Squamish people right across Canada to bring home powerful paychecks to protect our environment and to house our people. Would you agree with that, Chief?
Yes, and you know what? With our visit there, and I've seen some of our families working over there. We feel really good, you know. And, you know, everybody needs to feed their family, and everybody needs to eat.
Yes. Yeah. And they will. We're going to bring home the catch for our fishermen, bring home the harvest for our farmers, bring home the resource paychecks for our people, and that's going to be the bright future for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chief.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
He didn't state that the Liberals had done that.
Well, could you repeat what you said?
No, he stated the government of Canada had done that. No. Frankly, if you want to quote the commission.
The matter before us today is extremely serious. There is a glaring problem here that should alarm every Canadian. In fact, after hearing the Environment Commission testimony and reading his report, I think this may be the most expensive cover-up since Justin Trudeau was elected. In December 2020, the Liberals announced the Net Zero Accelerator. They charged taxpayers $3 billion to fund it. Less than 1 year later, they doubled the spending and announced another $5 billion for this government program, increasing the total cost to $8 billion. Yes, $8 billion. It is very important to note that the Liberals claim the purpose of this Net Zero Accelerator was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Their plan was to give away billions in tax dollars to large companies in exchange for a specific reduction of emissions. Usually when a government announces $8 billion in spending, they brag about it for years and talk about the results. But ever since the Net Zero Accelerator was established, we've barely heard a word from the Liberals on this $8 billion program. And now we know why they've been so quiet. Last week, Canada's Independent Environment Commissioner revealed that the government's Net Zero Accelerator is nothing more than another slush fund. He concluded that the Liberal government, and I quote, did not effectively manage the Net Zero Accelerator to decarbonize.
Hola, senor. We are gringos who wish to spend mucho dinero in your country.
Splendid. Welcome to Canada.
Canada! So to win Greta back, I have to go to Toronto.
Canada? Why should we leave America to visit America Junior?
Coming up next, a Canadian couple who say they are deathly afraid of scorpions.
Stings, eh? Oh, God!
Sting those Canucks.
I love this show. Take that, you stupid hosers!
Tonight, Canada turns to its most famous director, Ivan Reitman, the man who brought us Ghostbusters.
Hello, Calais, we're in luck. They had a Magnum at the shoe counter.
I knew it. You're there. Just hear me out.
Bart, forget it. I'm leaving in 10 minutes. My dad's shooting a movie in Toronto.
You're going to Spain?
Goodbye, Bart.
We aren't as well behaved as our goody two-shoes brother Canada, who, by the way, has never had a girlfriend. I'm just saying.
Okay, here are your fake Canadian health cards. Take them to any pharmacy and you'll get enough.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Maybe there's a little grass growing right along here. Some happy little things.
I love you. You love me. We all own our own bodies, so marry who you want and do whatever drugs you choose. And when it's time, you can die with dignity by determining your own end-of-life plan.
Hi, Maria!
Hi, Officer Winkles.
How you doing today?
I don't have to answer that question.
That is correct.
I'm recording you.
Am I being detained?
Nope.
Which I can legally do because I'm in a public place.
Come back if you have a warrant.
Alrighty.
Know your rights.
Yay!
Okay, Gumshoes, Carmen Sandiego is in a country where socialism failed. That narrows it down to Venezuela, Cuba, the former Soviet Union, Moldova, Laos, Vietnam, Albania, Angola.
So we did some digging into your past.
Oh, the suspense is killing me!
But we still haven't solved the case, Holmes. Why is marijuana a Schedule I drug?
Elementary, my dear Watson. Nixon and racism.
What?
You okay?
I don't know.
Hey, man, it's alright. It's alright. We've got qualified immunity. Qualified immunity. It's not for you, it's just for me. I shot your dog.
I shot your wife.
I get to go on with my life.
My favorite part is where the character says, I do not want green eggs and ham. And then Sam I Am says, that's fine. You don't have to eat them. That's your right. The end. It's a short book.
Here we see one of the last taxicab monopolies struggling for life. Competitors have entered their ecosystem.
Do you know what eminent domain abuse is? It's when the government decides the neighborhood of make-believe is better used by a Taiwanese LCD manufacturer.
Today we have a real senator. Hello, Senator.
How are you doing?
What is your favorite color?
I would have to say blue.
Me too. Tell me, why did you sell all your stock right before the crash?
I mean, it's literally just the tragedy of the commons, but they made it cute.
And that sound means we're in international waters. I'm gonna marry a robot and sell my kidney on eBay.
My dearest Rowena, today the district attorney filed criminal charges against a two-door sedan.
Carmen Sandiego is hiding in a country that contains an American military base. Is she in Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, the British Indian Ocean Territory, Cuba, Germany, Djibouti?
Menace.
Circle, square, rectangle, war factory.
All right, Jack, where is your gay wedding cake?
I refuse to bake a gay wedding cake, and you can't force me to. It's my right.
That is your right, but it is my right to kick you off of this show. Please leave.
Yep.
You homophobic bearded meat goblin.
I just want enough to warm it up some. I don't want to set it on fire. It's very easy to set it on fire.
Well, today on This Old House, we're at the city zoning office because they think our new porch is 2 inches too close to the sidewalk, which is f***ing bullshit because their sidewalk is too far away from the street, which they'd know about if they'd read any of the emails I'd sent them over the past 18 months. So join us as we waste our whole f***ing day on this shit.
The premiere of Thomas the High-Speed Rail has been delayed. Again. And at the 10 Bitcoin level, you receive a handsome tote bag.
Quack! Good one!
Quiet!
Very good!
Queen!
What else starts with the letter Q?
Space lasers.
Oh.
John Podesta and Hillary Clinton had an email exchange about hot dogs.
Where do we